The question is, if property investment in the UK is a long-term game, what are those strategies that you need to think about in advance to increase the likelihood of winning that game? I'm about to show you 23 of those which you might consider to start tackling now. The first strategy is writing a will. And probably you already know about this because it's quite common knowledge, but have you taken the time to actually go and write one? And to do that, you can do it for £100 with a lawyer and then write something general if you wish, but at least you need to have something in place. And one of the main reasons for that is because if you don't do it, the government is going to step in and they will decide what's going to happen with your assets. Now, there are other considerations on this that you can include. For example, at the moment, I'm rewriting my will because I want to include the name of my daughter, which at the time I wrote that version, the current version, we didn't have a name for her. My wife was just pregnant, and I want to include her name in the will. Now, legally, it's not necessarily to have her name there because it's kind of written to be open. Any child of mine, that's the way it's phrased. But I want to do it to make it more specific and as well to include some guardians, which we had forgotten to include, and those will be her grandparents in case my wife or myself are not around. So there you see, in this first strategy, we already are thinking about long term. Now, the second strategy is about thinking in advance what would happen if you lose your mental capacity. Yes, if you lose your mental capacity while you're still alive. For example, stroke, dementia, coma. If you are the one who knows the whole business and then you lose your mental capacities and you don't have something like a lasting power of attorney, then again, the government is going to step in and they're going to make the decisions for you. It doesn't matter in that case that your wife or that you have a wife, the government will step in and make a decision. So now this is a document, or I would say still two documents you need to write. One, which is a lasting power of attorney for somebody to make decisions for you in case you lose your mental capacities, but decisions in terms of health. And another one that you want to write for somebody to make decisions for you, financial decisions in terms of your portfolio and anything else. These on its own, you could do it in the government's website, and each one will cost you around £80, at least at the time of this video. So it's not super expensive, but they are documents that you should really have in place for your family to take care of you and your health decisions and your financial decisions in case you are alive but are not able to make those. Now, there is a risk here with the lasting power of attorney is who you are going to put in charge of those decisions. For health, hopefully it's somebody who cares deeply about you, a family member. And for financials, hopefully somebody who cares about you deeply as well, but who understands finance, understands money decisions, and understands property, which is something we will discuss more with other features or other strategies that we'll look at in this video. Now, the third strategy or consideration in this case is what's going to happen when you are 90 years old and you need to renew the mortgages of your properties, but you're going to be too old for banks to give you that sort of extension if you wanted to extend it. Now, when I say 90 years old, it could be 70. It really depends on the lenders and the situation in the market at that point in time. The older you get in property, the shorter the loans become, and therefore you need to think about this. Now, what many investors do is that they create a portfolio large enough so at some point in their lives, they can sell half of that portfolio, pay the debt on the other half of that portfolio, and then they remain with a debt-free portfolio of investments, which they could pass on or they could live on for 10, 20 years, and then plan how they are going to pass that on to other generations. But if you start thinking about that, it would mean that you need to know how much money you need to retire with or you want to retire with from property and calculate and do a financial model of how this could work for you to understand how you can live off that property debt-free, which reduces completely your risk, and it might be something that you want to do. The strategy number 4 is, as you probably know, and I've said this in many videos, is that 4 out of 5 properties in the UK are being bought through limited companies. Now, the way you manage the shares in those limited companies can mean that you can use it to transfer these assets to your family in a very tax efficient way. One of those is a family investment company. A family investment company is nothing else than a limited company where you create B shares for your family, but with no voting rights, and you retain A-type shares for you to control the limited company. So now this is very common in limited companies where you have these alphabet shares, which they can be changed to suit whatever you want to do. And what I just described, A shares for you with controlling voting rights, and then B shares for your family with no voting rights, and those can be turned afterwards, after a long time, into A shares. That's a bridge for you to plan how you're going to pass that wealth. Now, this can only be done for about 1 or 2 years after you open the limited company. So therefore, it's something you need to consider from the very beginning. Now, strategy number 5 is something that you probably have heard of before, which is a SSAS pension, SSAS, SSAS pension loan backs. And what this is that under the UK regulations, you could take your pension, which is the minimum to make it practical is about £100,000, and you could take your pension, create with the help of consultants, because this is not easy and is done through the HMRC, to create a self-administered pension fund, which has some costs, again, is complex, but the benefits of this is that you could use that pension fund to loan up to 50% of the funds in that loan to buy and invest in commercial property. Then the limited company will pay interest to the pension fund until the loan is paid in full. But what that means basically is that your self-administered pension fund becomes your own personal loan. Again, this is something very, very complex, and it can take many, many hours to talk about this. But again, you need to understand that's a possibility, and that's another asset, another strategy you could think about for long-term growth and long-term playing of this game. Strategy number 6 was one that until very recently, it was used to generate additional income, and it was to separate the freehold from the leasehold of properties. So for example, if you have a house that has the land, that's a freehold house, but you could legally separate both, create a leasehold for that property, and then you basically retain the freehold. You could sell the house, but you could retain ownership of the land. Now, as I said, not long ago, before the Freehold Reform Act, what was being done in the past is that those freeholds were created, especially for block of flats, and all the leaseholders in those block of flats would pay an amount to the freeholder, which then it would become income generating asset. Not a lot, mostly, but it was an income generated asset, and that freehold would increase in value as time passes. But that has changed now. If you do that at the moment, it would be a separation for protection, which is, for example, if you have the freehold on the land and then there is a problem that you need to sell, or somebody legally suits you and then wants to take the properties away, at least you would remain with the freehold. That's one of the ways, but that has changed now, but it's important for you to at least know that that exists. Strategy number 7 is a deed of variation capability. Did you know that if you are the heir of a will, after the donor's death, you could rewrite that will for up to 2 years? This could be used, just as an example, is if you have already a property portfolio and you want to take the will and the assets that come with a will of which you are the heir, then what you can do is to redirect that wealth to your children. So you You wouldn't receive it yourself, and then that would go to your children, and you would skip a generation of inheritance tax. Strategy number 8 is whole life insurance. This is a type of insurance that you can take to help you pay or help your family pay the inheritance tax bill that will come with the transfer of such tax. This type of policy is written in trust, so is directed to pay directly to the HMRC, meaning it falls outside your state and therefore helps you directly pay that bill. The benefits of such strategy are obvious. If you have this insurance, then you might not have to sell one or two of your properties to pay for the insurance for the inheritance tax, and therefore would keep your portfolio intact or as intact as possible so you can transfer that to your family. Now, the downside with this is that you need to pay the premium until your death. If you stop before, then you would have lost everything you paid before. Strategy number 9 is gifts out of surplus income. What this means is that you can provide unlimited gifts to your family, provided those gifts come from your income and not from capital. That means that if you can prove that by giving those gifts, you are not affecting your way of life or standard of life, then you can provide this. And you don't have to worry about the 7-year rule that normally applies to other gifts. I'm talking about means that if you provide, let's say, £1,000 gift to one of your relatives and you die before 7 years, then your relative needs to pay tax on those, which is kind of a gamble, in my opinion. Now, your responsibility with these sort of surplus income gifts are that you need to keep records of your expenses in case you are audited, and you need to demonstrate that this money came out of income and not capital money. Strategy number 10 is key person of influence insurance. If you are the one who manages the whole business and you are the one who knows about property, and therefore that expertise is very much needed to keep the business running, then this sort of insurance would give you a lump sum to hire somebody in the case you pass, and therefore the estate and the whole portfolio can be maintained. If you, for example, didn't see a video like this one, where I am telling you to pass the knowledge and the systems to your close relative ones, because, for example, a will without knowing how the whole system works is actually dangerous for your own family. But we'll discuss that in a minute. Another potential strategy, which is the number 11, and this is for you to be really, really well organized, is that if you know your portfolio enough and you can forecast when major repairs works like replacing a roof are necessary, then you can ring fence a fund savings little by little, 5% of the income every month, to save towards those repairs. So at the time they come, they're not a massive pain for you or your relatives. Strategy number 12 is one which I know is going to give you a headache, and is creating an operations manual for your business. See, entrepreneurs like you and me want to set up a business because of the freedom of it. But the freedom doesn't come without a structure. And that's where the headaches come for all of us. Now, our operations manual is to effectively record everything you do in your business so you can pass that knowledge, you can train employees, and you can train even family members who will take over at some point. An operation manual like this is super important, but the downside is that it takes effort and it can be complicated to maintain because you need to operate at 2 different levels, the doing and the recording. And not many people really is able to do that or willing to do that. But an operations manual will help you achieve just that, to record the knowledge that is required to run your portfolio a lot easier when you are not there. My operations manual, the one I've built for my business and my portfolio at the moment, is about 50 pages long. And it's simply a Word document with videos and writing and tables of everything we do and how it should be done. So it follows the law and follows best practice for us to achieve a smooth running portfolio. Strategy number 13 is a digital legacy vault. As you probably know, by now in this day and age, and it's just getting worse, everything is going digital. You have passwords for different accounts. Those are bills, accounts, bank accounts, banking apps, cloud accounting, you name it. And if you are not there, somebody needs to have all this information or have access to all this information easily. Now, one of the best current ways to do that is to have password management systems. And those are basically applications you can pay for. You have a one master password to enter the application, which you could share with your family or you could share with your business associates. And if they need to enter and open all these platforms, that one single password will allow you to go into the all other different accounts. Again, don't forget to make a note on your operations manual about it, but a digital legacy vault works very well in this way. Now, the problem is, well, I wouldn't say problem, is basically you need to be careful how you manage the master password. Strategy number 14 is about a professional team handover. What this means is at some point you should be able, or you should include your family into the business and connect them with your lawyers, your accountants, your brokers, whoever you currently work with or you normally work with, because they know your affairs and they can continue that business. Now, this is not easy to do, because to do that, you need to be working on a day-to-day basis with somebody you want to coach and train for that person to understand really, really well the business. Now, if that's your wife, great. If that's your daughter or son, great. Because then, as I said at the very beginning, a will without the knowledge of how to run the portfolio of your business is not going to be enough. The will just open the door for your family to enter and try to operate the systems. But then if they don't know how to do it, it might be a disaster. Strategy number 15 is, if you have many properties which are leasehold, you could plan in the long term to buy the freehold if that's possible. The reason for this is because, as you know, leasehold property, once is around below 80 years of leasehold, the value of that property is going to decrease tremendously, and you might lose that asset. And if you want to extend that leasehold, then it's going to be very expensive depending when you decide to do it. But certain leaseholds are actually not that expensive. We recently bought one for a property that had 900 years lease, didn't pay much ground rent, and the total cost with lawyers included was about £5,000. Strategy number 18 is about EPCs. As you know, for example, in 2030, EPCs for rented properties will have to be C. Something in the long term that you could do is start renovating your properties or start improving those properties from the EPC certificate recommendations, so you can actually upgrade those ratings and be prepared for it. The downside here is obviously that refurbishing a property, the changes are complex, it could be very expensive. But that, opposed to the fact that if in 2030 the property is not C, you cannot rent it, is an obvious choice you need to make. Now, strategy number 17 is about the diversification of locations and council areas as well. Why? Because in the UK, different councils behave different. Some of them are more strict than others. And as you know, the planning regulations in the UK can be modified at local level. And some councils, and I know this from experience, can be really, really tough compared to other councils which are just in front of those or next to those councils, which could be more relaxed. Now, this obviously has some disadvantages, like, for example, if your portfolio is spread out across a big region, you kind of lose economy of scale. But again, it could be something that would benefit you if your portfolio is getting larger and larger. Strategy 18 is planning gains sleepers. And this is something I actually do quite a lot with my investors. And is, for example, buying properties with potential that, even though the investor doesn't have enough funds to do the full transformation now, they can buy the property, they can put it to work, and then later on they have the option to upgrade and generate capital gains. An example of this is a property that you can buy to do buy-to-let, but in the right location with the right size and potential to create a HMO later on in the future. Strategy number 19. It's something that you could use to guide your family after you're passing. And it's a letter of wishes. You could write that along with your will, and even though your family can choose to ignore it, you can give guidance as to how you would like them to treat and manage that portfolio. That would be a final piece of wisdom for you to your family, hoping they protect and don't destroy what it took you that much effort to create. Strategy 20 is about coaching sessions for your family. I know for a fact that not everybody likes numbers, not everybody likes property, and the most important step that you can take early when your portfolio is growing, and I mentioned this before in this video, is to involve somebody from your family who has some attitudes about this. Somebody from your family who has aptitude for this. For example, they like numbers, even though property math is very simple. Most of it, some people might not like it. Some people might not like to deal with tenants or the administration of the properties or the management of council regulations, etc., etc. It takes certain person to be able to run a business like that. If you're lucky enough to have somebody who can follow your steps, then create a weekly or 2 weekly coaching sessions. So you teach that person everything you know about property. And if that person can help you write the operations manual that we talked about before, even better, because you're transferring something very powerful. You're transferring financial education, you're training somebody to take over, and that is going to make an incredible addition to your business, because if you fall sick, then that person can cover for you, and it helps you make the whole thing more and more passive for you, even though there is no 100% passive asset in this world. Strategy number 21 is a family constitution or a charter. If your legacy is big enough, if your legacy is complex enough, and you foresee that there are important failure points, or there could be difference between your family, which money normally causes, a family constitution or charter, an agreement with all the members of the family, could help you and them understand how the family business should be run. What's the culture? What are the goals? What's the rules that need to be respected when running that portfolio? What to do when things go wrong? All this could be agreed, and again, is an act of leadership from your part to be able to ensure that your legacy lasts longer. Strategy number 22 is prenuptial agreements for heirs. If the chosen structure for your wealth is through a trust, this strategy could help to include clauses where the wealth distribution is conditional to prenups. And the reason for this is obvious. After a divorce, the wealth could be halved, and therefore the family wealth would be tremendously affected. So this could be a strategy for the very long-term preservation of wealth. I wouldn't be surprised if the royal family didn't consider this from the very beginning. And last but not least, strategy number 23 is similar to the coaching sessions we discussed before, but it goes deeper. It goes deeper to ensure that the members of your family, the ones that you consider that will need to have formal education to become competent asset owners. In other words, they need to know about money. So if you're very serious about the long-term preservation of your wealth, the best way you can do is to get those heirs of your family to understand how money works, how the rich think, how wealth is created, how it's preserved, how tax affects that wealth, and how to protect it as the law evolves and loopholes are closed by the government and then more are open. And to finalize, a little bit of food for thought, if I haven't already given you a lot of it, and is that it takes a lot of work to create assets. It takes a lot of re-education from yourself to liberate you from the education that normally we all get from schools, universities, where they only teach us to be employees. And it takes a lot of energy to change that education or to complement it with real financial education so we can create and, most importantly, keep assets. And the way you do that is thinking in the long term and acting consistently during that long term. And as you can see from all these strategies, this is not something that you can do 2 days before you die and then you are good to go. These strategies take years and years to be implemented. They need to review it constantly so they still apply and they work. You need to educate your family. You need to ensure that they have the sort of same thinking that you have, because the idea is to create cross-generational wealth and avoid what in normal families or average families happens, which is the first generation creates the wealth, the second generation enjoys the wealth without creating more wealth, and the third generation destroys the wealth. And you want to avoid that. This is Noel Cardona. This is propertycashflow.co.uk. And if you need to know more about how we can manage your properties or how we can help you invest in the areas of Wirral and Liverpool, send me an email at info@propertycashflow.co.uk or send me a WhatsApp to 07411 and I'll be extremely happy to talk to you. Thank you very much. See you in the next one.